Welcome to Ladies Talking Love, episode 20. In this roundtable episode, I talk with Jana and Elizabeth about how they created intimacy in their marriages. It's raw and beautiful, and they share so many great personal stories and insights that I almost cried when we were recording this. It was just so beautiful. I hope that you feel hopeful after listening to this, hopeful in the type of relationship or marriage that you can create as you're willing to be raw and vulnerable with your spouse and kind of step into a really uncomfortable unknown, because there could be rejection, but when we step into it, it can create something so beautiful as we show our spouse or partner our true selves. It's Ladies Talking Love, a community of women uncovering more joy and fulfillment in sex as we learn from experts and amazing women like you. Together, let's create a world where women's sexuality is celebrated and understood, beginning with our own. I'm your host, Ariel Finlinson. Let's talk love. I cannot believe that this is our last episode of season 1, but it's been a great season. Thanks so much for coming on this journey with me to learn together about our sexuality and about how we can kind of shift some of these harmful cultural views that we may have grown up with. If you get a chance in the season break, I would love if you follow along with me on Instagram at ladies.talkinglove. And I want to hear all your requests for topic ideas and for guests to come on. I'm getting our season 2 ready and reaching out to people to come on. So if you have any thoughts or tips, I'd love that. And please reach out if you and some of your friends would like to come on a roundtable episode. It's so fun to meet you, and I have learned so much from each of you that has been brave to come on and share. You all have so much insight. In the break, if you get a chance, I would love if you could still share the podcast with your friends and family or on social media and leave a review. It always helps other people to find the podcast and help me know what we're doing well and maybe what we can improve as well. Thank you so much for being here with me. I'm excited to jump in and hear your thoughts about this roundtable episode. So without further ado, let's talk love. This is so fun to have Elizabeth and Jana on from Maryland for our roundtable today. Thanks for joining me, guys.
You're welcome.
I'll let Jana go ahead and start by introducing herself.
My name's Jana. I live in Southern Maryland. I am married to my wonderful husband, Gary, and we have 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl, 17, 14, and 10. I like to exercise and be outside and be active and moving. I don't like to sit still. So I'm always moving, and I like to learn and study and be creative and like learning all kinds of stuff.
And I'm Elizabeth, and I also live in Southern Maryland, and I live here with my husband and our 5 kids, ages 17 to 7. And I love to hike. That's one of my favorite things to do, and read and being with my family and just doing all the things that they love to do too.
I know, but we need to have like a ladies talking love retreat, hiking retreat, because I love hiking too. So we got to plan this. And I'm so glad to have you guys on with some older kids, because I think a lot of us so far have kind of had a little bit younger families. So this is going to be awesome to have some other perspectives coming in. And today we wanted to kind of focus on improving emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, all the things that come with intimacy in a marriage. And so I wanted to start off by kind of knowing how you both in your marriages maybe started to realize that there could be more intimacy or it could be better in your relationship.
So for me, a couple years ago, I was really angry all the time, super angry, super resentful, like just really unhappy and discontent, like in life in general, but also in my marriage. And our relationship felt very lopsided. Like I'm a natural giver. My husband's a natural receiver. And so it was like I was giving, and he was taking, and it never flopped. And so I think just it couldn't be ignored anymore after about 16 years of marriage. I was like, this is not happening anymore. Like something needs to give. And so that's when I started thinking, I got to make some changes.
And for me, I'm just one of those people that I kind of always think that everything could be better. Like, I'm just like, well, how could this improve? And one of the things that I love about my husband is he is content. And so he helps me see how good things are, because I'm always like, but this could be better and we could improve here. And so it was just, for me, when I became more, I think, focused on my relationship, when we became more focused on our relationship, it was just as we got older, we started to see couples and we started to see our friends getting divorced. And then we started to see some of our friends' relationships being amazing. And, you know, our parents were getting older and seeing their relationships. So I think just as time went on, as we started to observe those around us, we became really cognizant of our relationship.
What were some things that you noticed that maybe you wanted in your relationship that you saw in other people's?
So I think some of the things that I noticed in other people's relationships that I really, really wanted was just this love and acceptance that we saw in some relationships, where there were these two individuals that were completely independent of one another, very different, very, very different individuals, yet there was this complete love and acceptance of them. And that was really neat to see that modeled, because we also saw the opposite modeled of people enmeshed together and and not working well together, or not even knowing that they were an independent person and trying to manipulate and change other people. So we were really lucky to see both things, and to be able to step back and say, okay, that's what we want. What do we need to do to get there?
And I love both of these sides, because I personally can relate to both of them. Like, I have a very content husband, but I am also like, but we can make this better. We can make this better. And I've also been really angry for a long period of time as well. Just like, because for me, I feel like I was kind of raised as a woman to be like, well, I guess I just give. I guess that's what it is. And I guess that's just what I do. And there was kind of a breaking point where it's like, I can't do this. This isn't fair. I'm feeling so unfulfilled and angry all the time. So what kind of, for you, Jana, how did you start to kind of heal that? Because that can be really hard, especially, you said it'd been 16 years already. Sometimes we get used to like these patterns in our relationship. How did you have that conversation with your husband? I'm sure it wasn't easy the first time. How did you kind of work together to work through that really hard anger and frustration?
So the thing that I did first was I started following Dr. Jennifer Finlayson Fife, and just through her podcast and through her work, I realized what I was contributing to the relationship that was causing the problems. And so before I ever even approached my husband about like, you're doing this and this and this, I started taking an active look at what I was doing to create the dynamic, because it wasn't him, it was us. And so I first started like looking at my part in creating this dynamic that we had. And I think a ton of reading, a ton of podcasts, just to understand like where, like, how did I get to this place? Like, how did we get to this place? How did we get here? And then like, what tools or skills do I need to then drive us to a different place? And so that's kind of where I started.
That's so mature of you.
I was old
like
by
to
then.
Just blame. I'm like, this is your fault. What were some of the things that you noticed that you could change?
So the biggest thing, and this is something that I'm still working on, is not belonging to myself. So I was like a people pleaser and very much a giver. And so I basically just did what other people wanted me to do. Like, I was a mom, I was a wife, and that was it. I wasn't a Jana anymore. I completely gave that up. So that was the biggest thing.
So the shift was belonging to yourself.
Belonging to myself. Like, I had to understand that it was okay to be a person again. Like, I can be a wife and a mom, and I can still be a person. I can have wants and needs and desires. I can make my own decisions. Like, I can have opinions different than my husband. Like, that was pretty big for me, which sounds, I mean, it sounds obvious, yes, but it was not obvious to me. Like,
it's not. I feel like a lot of us struggle with that. And how did you start? Because it can be really hard. And it can be hard for our spouse to be like, wait a minute, you have an opinion now. Like,
Yeah, that probably wasn't the first piece that I started changing, was like having an opinion. That took a while. But I also like learned that I'm not a good receiver. I just would give and give and give, and he would try to give back to me and I wouldn't take it. And so then he would just be like, well, there's no point in giving because you're not taking it. So I really had to open up to receiving from him love, gifts, time, energy. Like I wasn't getting any of it. And so that was, I think, the first piece where I was like, oh my goodness, I can see that I am not taking what you are giving. Like I have built this wall and you're not in. Like,
how were you able to start that, to let him start to give to you?
I think that was probably where the first hard conversation came in, was when I first realized this. I said something to him and he was kind of like, yeah, yeah, like you're not a good receiver. And because I think I'd asked him like, why, like, how do you show love to me? And what do you do to like give me love? And he would list off a couple things and I'd be like, like, I don't, I'm not feeling that. And then he was like, well, I stopped because you wouldn't get it. And then I had to be like, oh, like I had to not take it personally. You know, like I couldn't put up my defenses and be like, hey, wait a minute, that's not nice. Don't say that I'm not good at that, because it was totally true. So I had to like own it. Okay, I am a terrible receiver. Like I will own that and I will work at it. And so that's been a process, but that was probably the first thing that I had to do, was own, okay, I'm terrible at this. And that's why you stop. Like I created this in our marriage. I will own this.
And I think that is so powerful. Even just that conversation that you had to recognize and start to shift. That was huge for me, to be like, I can receive, I can give, but it also is time for me to learn how to receive, because I think most of our spouses, I hope all of them, want to give us love, but if we're not able to receive it, we can't, you know? And what about for you, Elizabeth? How did you kind of start? Because you were in a little bit of a different situation, but you had noticed the good things and the couples getting divorced. How did you start to improve your marriage from where you were at?
For me, I just really started working on me and just really started focusing on me and reflecting on what I was doing or not doing. But then I think too, I was able to have some really vulnerable conversations. I was willing to put myself out there more than I ever had before. And everything kind of went to the next level as we started talking about more and more things and sharing. And it wasn't just, it was about everything. It was about our kids. It was about our life choices, you know, like that we had chosen for me to stay home and chosen for him to go to work, and how that felt to me, and how that felt at different times in our lives. And, you know, and then just our extended family relationships and our friends. And we just started talking about, like, really, really talking about things that we maybe hadn't talked about before.
Was it some of the things had just been like, this is how it is, but you started to talk about like, how is this actually working? This decision that we made.
Why is it this way?
Right. So I think we were having babies and we were busy and we were just taking care of life. You know, when you have little ones, you are just like, they are the priority. They have to be cared for. They can't take care of themselves. And we were both kind and loving and kind to each other. And so he's very helpful, and you know, and we were tired and and so we just didn't really take the time to have those conversations, because we would go out and do something and we wanted to just kind of have fun and relax. We didn't want to be like,
have a deep conversation.
Yeah. And I think too, like, I hadn't taken time to take care of me enough to have an honest and open conversation. It would have been a fight. Like, hey, you're doing this, or this is going on, or I'm not liking this. And so we just kind of didn't talk about that stuff until I started to say, oh, okay, I'm doing this. I'm not feeling good here. And then we were able to take communication to an appropriate place where I could own me and we could have a conversation instead of me trying to change him.
So what did that look like? What were some things that you noticed about yourself?
So You want me to share personal stuff?
Yeah.
So what are some things that I noticed about myself? So I noticed about myself that I was pretty codependent, that I really needed approval from him and from everyone around me. And that was a really pretty miserable place to live, always needing that outside approval. So
I think that's very common in women,
Oh.
especially because that was me too.
Yeah.
That was totally me.
I think it's very, very common.
Yeah.
I can say me too. And I would even put words in his head. Like, he didn't tell me that. I just thought that's what he wanted me to do.
Yeah. Right.
So I recognized I was pretty codependent. I recognized that I had really taken on a victim mentality instead of owning my life.
That's me too.
And so as I was able to say to him, like, I was able to start to use phrases like, hey, this is the story I'm telling myself. Is this true? Like, this is what's going on in my head. Is this how you see it as well? And that was hard because sometimes the answer was, yeah, that's how I see it. And sometimes the answer was, no, that's not how I see it. But both answers were hard because it was like, wait, oh, that is how you see it. I really am behaving in that manner. And it really is hurtful. And these really are the consequences. And then also it was, oh, you don't see it that way. I'm making this up in my head. Like,
where did that come from?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you give us any examples, either of you, what that looked like those conversations of things you're like, that is true, or, oh, that's not true?
Well, I think for me, like, learning that I was a terrible receiver, like when he agreed with me, it was like,
Yeah.
like, I didn't want that to be true. Like, I knew it was true, but I didn't want it to be true. So when he verified that, then it was like, oh, yes. And when I get upset, I withdraw. So I will just shut down, leave the room, don't talk about it. Like, I don't even want to be there. And so we couldn't have some of those hard conversations because I would withdraw. So again, it was like, I knew in the back of my head that that's what I did. But when he said that to me, or we had that conversation, it was like that gut punch, like, you're right. That is what I do. And we can't move forward until I can stand in this conversation and, like, as much, like, all my instincts are screaming to get out, like, get out. And I have to force myself to stand there and be in that, that uncomfortable conversation. So those were two that I noticed that I for sure do, and that I didn't want to know it.
Yeah. So how did you start then? These conversations started happening, it sounds like, between both of your spouses. And I love that idea too, that I think a lot of it is us. I know for me, sometimes I want to blame. I like to blame people instead of take ownership. But really, a lot of it has to start with us noticing to make those changes. So what happened after that? You opened up, you talked with your husbands. How did things start to change?
I think for me, it was just the willingness to be open, to have those conversations, because they are so hard and it's so scary. I mean, the definition of intimacy is to know someone and to be known. But if you're not willing to be known, you can't be intimate. Like, you cannot have an intimate marriage if you're not willing to open up and have those conversations. So I think for me, it was the willingness that I needed to let him in.
Yes.
After so long, we'd had a good marriage, but it was pretty superficial because there was a lot that we just didn't share because it was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Or, I was terrified that he would reject it, or like, and without that validation, again, like, then I'm nothing if, I don't get that validation from him. So for me, it was just that willingness to open up the conversation and say, this is how I'm feeling in this marriage. This is how I'm feeling about myself. Things need to change. This is what I've noticed. This is what I'm working on. And as I continued to work on myself and we had those conversations, I didn't even have to necessarily ask him to change. He started doing things on his own as he noticed me being willing to put in that time and effort.
You had opened yourself up to want to receive.
Yeah. When I stopped blaming him as being the problem and I started looking at myself, he took notice of that. And within a couple months, I started noticing a difference. I think one, because I was viewing things differently, and two, because I think he was acting differently towards me because I was acting differently towards me.
Yeah.
And that brought a different dynamic to the relationship. And then it like compounds, you know, as you keep pushing each other, it just grows and grows and grows.
It does. So just to answer for kind of where the question was like, where do I start? I wrote down just a few notes with that question of like what started to change. And well, it was for me, I started to change and I really started to address my pride. And then one thing that was really huge that started to change in me and then in our family and our relationship was I took the opportunity to get to know my husband's family better in a really more intimate way, to really understand them and to see all of their goodness. And I had the time to serve them in a different way than I ever had before, and to hear stories and to come across things in a different way. And as I did this, I started to see how much love there was in his family. And then I started to recognize that the type of love that their family had was different than the type of love I experienced in my family. And I absolutely love my family so much. There is so much love and so much goodness in my family. And as I saw my husband's family, I saw this complete acceptance of one another, very different like life choices and different things. Yet when they came together, there was just this, they have this ease with one another. And I was just like, what is this? And I started to recognize how loving of family that my husband came from. And I really started to recognize that he offered that love to me. And I didn't take it because I was scared and because I was prideful and because I wanted it to look a certain way. And so as I started to get to know his family better and get to know my family better in a really scary way, it was really scary for me to look at my family and see like, wait, I don't feel this love from them. And it was hard to say like, wait, I truly don't feel that. But then to be able to work through that and to say that's okay, and to recognize all the goodness there, but then to really embrace this love that he brings, and then to create it into our own family. There also happened like where we became our own family in all of this too, where we started to recognize all of this.
How did that happen? What ways were you able to notice that different type of love in his family? And then how did that shift into creating your own family? If you can explain it a little more.
So about 3.5 years ago, my mother-in-law passed away unexpectedly and in an accident. So it was traumatic and a really different situation than we ever expected to lose one of our parents in. And through that, we had the chance to come together as a family and, you know, support each other and help each other. And suddenly we're going through all of his mom's stuff and we're, you know, helping his dad in a different way, and not really helping, but just trying to be a supportive family. And so, you know, we were connecting with siblings in a different way. And so we were really thrown into this situation unexpectedly, and we decided to show up instead of run away. But through all of it, I was able to take my mother-in-law's clothing and make blankets. I made quilts for the family out of these things. And during that time, I was able to listen to a lot of audiobooks, but also just like so many of her pieces of clothing were filled with memories. And so, you know, I would call one of his siblings or text an aunt or something and talk about these different things. And that was what really like opened it didn't. I chose to walk through that open door, and the door may have been open all along. And one of the things that I realized through going through her clothes and going through her things and going through her pictures and seeing all her things was that she offered me love. And she offered her love to me from the very beginning, and I didn't accept it. And I recognized that I was doing that with my husband and with other people in my life. And because she was gone, and that was like, I couldn't have that anymore. I couldn't fix that relationship. It really pushed me to want to fix that really intimate part of my relationship with my husband and with other people. And so that was really what gave me the chance to say, wait, this is here, and I can choose to accept it, or I can choose to fight it. And I just always wanted things to look different, instead of saying, oh my gosh, look at this great family and love that I have, and all of the good that they have to offer. Like, it's just right here before me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That is a really cool story. And then as you were able to start accepting it, it kind of naturally helped your family become closer.
It did. Well, and I think as my husband and I really became united, it just pulled our kids in. We just it changed from me wanting to like go and do other things, or always include my family, or always include his family, to really become our own family unit, where we were like, wait, we are a family. It's me and you, and it's our kids, and all of these other people are wonderful, and we've gained so much, and we want them to be a part of our lives, but we are all that matters, truthfully. And like, my relationship with him is what matters most. And so as we grew together, it's just been neat to see our kids, like, they want to be with us now, and they want to be a part of us, instead of just always looking outward for that approval and acceptance.
Like you were saying before we got on recording, that you can't get them out of your bed at night.
Yes, it's true. It is true. They just always want to be with us.
I think both of those, what you said, I think that's something that I have learned about what true love is, that I didn't understand for so long, is the beauty of showing those pieces of us that we think will change the love of our spouse for us. And then when I've taken that step, it's scary and it's hard to think like, oh, are they going to accept me? And then they do. And when they do, that's what creates this beautiful love that is just, the only way I've been able to kind of describe it is I feel like I can fly. Like I feel like I'm free because I can be me and I can be accepted. And if I come and I've messed up, I still know that the love is there and we can work on how I can improve, but it doesn't change the love when I mess up or when I do a good job. It's just freedom, this freedom to be me. And you guys both expressed that so beautifully.
I think into like an intimate marriage is terrifying in a way, because to show up that much with no guarantee that the other person will also show up that way or will always be there.
Right.
I mean, with the death of your mother-in-law, like suddenly she wasn't there.
Yes.
And so I think to love so much is scary.
It is. I actually had that written down too, that like all of this,
you have to confront that fear when you open, like when you rip your heart open to allow somebody else in.
Yeah.
Scary.
It is, because there are no guarantees that they will be there tomorrow.
Yep.
And as you are that vulnerable within yourself and you've accepted yourself enough, you recognize, or I've recognized, oh my gosh, I could have walked away. Yeah. But I chose to stay. But then I'm like, wait, he could walk away.
He could walk away.
But he's chosen to stay. But we also know, like, that doesn't guarantee that, like,
this still doesn't
anything can happen in the next, tomorrow.
Yes.
Like, nothing is
a guarantee.
Guaranteed.
And so it's choosing to be very, very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I love what you said. Like, it's about us. That's something that I've had to come to too. Like, I can't guarantee what my spouse is going to do. And what we've created, I trust and I feel free, but I really can only give myself. And at the end of the day, even if things change or like things are hard in some future time, like I want to be able to look back and be grateful that I gave myself, even if things didn't. But I hope that we'll keep giving to each other. And I don't think we can experience that unless we're willing to be vulnerable and give. And I think there's probably less chance for those hardships too if we both are giving, even though it's scary. I don't know if that makes
No,
sense. Do you guys agree?
I totally agree. Like, it's a paradox where you're just like, okay, be super vulnerable and you recognize everything can fall apart, but really it's actually building your security.
Yes.
That paradox that Elizabeth talked about is also what drives passion and desire in marriage. And so without that understanding that this is a completely different person with their own likes and dislikes and wants and needs and desires and choices, and they might one day wake up and not choose me, that drives my desire for him. And that passion in the marriage is the coming together of these two unknowns that without that paradox, it's like suffocating. The marriage becomes suffocating when you don't have that difference. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah. No, it totally does.
Like I have felt suffocated in my marriage before because I just felt like I wasn't present. I was not a person. I had been sucked up into him.
Right.
And so when we first got married, I could not fall asleep with him touching me. Like I had to be completely on the opposite side of the bed, like, give me a kiss, I'm going to roll over, don't touch me again. And that went for years and years and years. And I just thought it was me. I'm not a touchy-feely person. Like I just can't fall asleep with you touching me. And then I got to the point where I could fall asleep with my hand on his arm. And I was like, whoa, this is big.
We are intimate.
Made it. And then within the last couple of years, as we have really opened ourselves up to being more vulnerable and intimate, and I have felt myself becoming a person again, like I am now a different person than just sucked up into him, I have been able to learn to fall asleep while spooning. And first it was me spooning him. That became easier. And the first morning I woke up and realized I had fallen asleep like that. It was like, oh, like, this is amazing. Like, I can't believe that just happened. And then it took a couple more months and I could fall asleep with him spooning me. Where before, if he had his arm on me, it felt so heavy. Like I am like suffocating in this, like your arm is so heavy. Like I can't like get it off of me. I can't have you touching me. And to realize that that was not just me being not a touchy-feely person, but that was me feeling suffocated in my marriage because I wasn't showing up as a person. I was just doing whatever I was told to, like I was told to do. I was turning all of my power and authority over to him because I thought that's what a good marriage was.
And so it almost maybe felt like touching him was like you were having to give more instead of like, this is a recharging moment where we're together and it recharges us both.
I was still giving to him or he was suffocating me by needing this.
Yeah.
But just putting that together, they seemed as two different things, but realizing that how intertwined the physical is with the emotional, that when I emotionally resurfaced, then the physical part also changed.
Yeah, which is a perfect segue. Okay, so tell us, so what happened with your physical desire? You talked a little bit about how the desire came back because of the unknown. You put yourself out there and you were known, but that unknown of them, because you're always knowing more about this unknown person, it like makes you kind of drives you to want to know them. Did I explain that right, Jana, what you've been feeling?
Yeah.
So how can you both like give us a little more details how that kind of affected your sex life and also your desire? Elizabeth, if you have a little more to add to that.
Just for me, like I wanted to be together more. Like I wanted to feel that physical united in a different way than ever before. It was like my soul was craving to physically be together. And it really shifted from this thing that we enjoyed and thought was great before to something that really was unifying and solidifying and building me up emotionally and physically. And it was like all of the benefits of a healthy sexual relationship all of a sudden we're just like, oh yeah, I see that and that and that and that. They're all like here.
Like, oh, this is why people like it. Okay.
And I liked it before. Like we've always, it's always been something that I felt like was a pretty good thing for us. Yeah. But then when we moved to like more vulnerability and really being intimate and having these harder conversations about life and about our sex life too, like talking about all of these different things, it just changed how everything felt when we were together. That it was just like, this is worth these really hard conversations. This is worth saying, oh my gosh, I'm such a prideful person. What do I need to change? This is worth the 3-hour hike that we cried and talked and cried and cried on, because it felt so different and so good in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, I love how you said too, like it can be good, but when you bring this emotional aspect in, it's like fireworks. And like your whole soul and body is almost like healed and rejuvenated, and like your connection. And it's just, yeah, you described that way better than I did. I should have just
Well, I tell my kids too, I talk to them, I'm like, I just want you guys to understand that like the things that we talk to you about, we teach our children abstinence until marriage. And that is a very debatable conversation, because there's a lot of science, behind that it's important to have these sexual relationships before you get married and things like that. And as I have gone through these last few years of just emotionally connecting and really developing a deeper, more intimate relationship and seeing how it has affected our sexual relationship, I have communicated with my kids that there's more to this sexual relationship than just the anatomy part of things.
Yep.
And it's so important. Like, that's one of the reasons we wait until marriage, because there is a commitment there that is different.
Yeah.
And that it's just like, there's just so much more to it. And it's what I believe at this time for your best good. And so that is why I'm teaching this to you, because I've seen it in my life, the understanding that this is way bigger than a good night in bed.
When souls are connecting, and you can't have the soul connection without the vulnerability and the openness of a committed relationship where you have a life and a history together, where that comes into play. Like, you have a history with this person of, they are there for me and we have each other's back, and we have been through hell and back together. And so that comes out in the sexual relationship versus just the physical side of it. Like, it's almost like this transcendent experience when you bring both sides together, the soul emotion with the physical, where I don't think you can't have that in a one night stand or just a hookup or like,
or even like, just a different relationship. You can't have that in.
Which I love you're sharing that with your kids, and you're talking about this now, because I think a lot of us, we have the right relationship to create this, but we haven't known how to move it. I'm just so glad we're talking about this, because that is like one of the biggest things I want women to understand, and want us as couples to know that we can move into this way bigger, way more beautiful when we have that commitment already. And we're just missing these key little steps. And I loved, there's a pastor that he has this kind of quote that he talks about, when we undress emotionally, it makes us want to undress physically. And I think that is what we're talking about. Like, it makes us want to be together physically when we can connect emotionally.
I totally agree.
And say, I have noticed that my husband has become more physically attractive to me, and nothing physically has really changed. Like, we're in our early 40s. We're not the same as we were when we got married, but like the physical aspect, like I look at him and I feel different than I did 5 years ago. And I think because there is the emotional connection and not just a physical connection, I almost feel like we're having a second honeymoon period. Like, I would say the sex is better now than it has ever been our entire marriage.
And I just keep thinking too, like, there is the aspect though, like, I have done a lot of my own sexual, like, physiological understanding and teaching. And I think that has helped as well. Because even if you have this great emotional connection, but you don't know your body with what your body's doing or his body. So there's that element too, that I'm not really trained to speak on that at all, but like, that has been part of my experience too, that I think has
to be open to exploring and learning about your body and his body. And
women are taught a certain way about their sexuality and how they should relate to it. And so understanding, like, are these thoughts working for me? Do I need to pick apart these thoughts that I've had about my sexuality and what it means to be a woman and maybe create some new thoughts and some new feelings about sex and sexuality and the goodness of it, not just for the man, but for me. This is part of me.
Yes.
And I can explore it and understand it and love it and integrate it. And it's good.
And that it's going to be healing and like something that's empowering in your relationship, which actually I would love for you guys to, if you could give us a couple tips. How did you find time for this? Because that's one thing I think that can be so hard, is that a lot of us as women carry these heavy burdens. We carry a lot of emotional needs of our children, especially for stay-at-home moms, which by default, then our husbands might not be there during the day. And we have to kind of carry these heavy emotional needs that it's like, I can't make space for one more thing, however much you're telling me it's good. But I have definitely found as I've made space, it empowers me to not feel as heavy burdened. But how did you make time for this? How were you able to prioritize it and not get overburdened with these heavy things that we carry?
I think one key step for me was in learning that I was a priority, that I didn't have to put myself at the very bottom of the priority list under everything else. That for me to sit down and read a book or listen to a podcast or something that was going to help me grow as a person, that was okay to put above maybe the laundry or like I didn't have to be at the bottom of the priority list. I could take time for myself. And so in carving out, 30 to 40 minutes a day, or I like to listen to podcasts while I'm exercising or walking or cooking or cleaning, like I have a lot of podcasts going. But I also think for me that COVID was a huge blessing in that we were home and there was nothing else to do. And so I was able, like with my kids being older, there was sports and activities and we were go all the time. And we were not home, like ever. We were almost never home. And so everything shut down and we were home all the time. And I had a lot more time to sit back and spend on diving into some of the stuff that I might not have had earlier. And so you find yourself in like a situation where you are given time, then take it and use it to really, like, I have made drastic changes over the last year that maybe would have taken me twice as long because I have had the time. So in whatever way you can carve out the time, I would say, like, use it. If you can get it, use it for yourself.
I think for me, I just wanted it bad enough. I wanted to understand my physical body. I wanted to understand my post 5 babies body. I'm going to be 40 this year. I wanted to understand my body. So I think for me, I was really recognizing like my body's changing. And so I wanted to learn more about that. And then when you're put in a traumatic event, like you just kind of have to deal with it. And so that really plummeted, just pushing through things and saying, okay, let's deal with what is going on. And I've had kind of the opposite experience for Jana with COVID, where I felt like I have one of my kids is just an all hands on deck kid. And then she was home all the time. Right. Like it is all hands on deck from when she's awake to when she goes to bed, and especially with me in particular. And so I haven't had that same experience, but I've still been just taking a moment when I can. I do. And I get up early. My youngest is 7 now. And so I can get up early before them and things like that. And so I think too, just taking what you can and accepting that is good enough. Yeah. Like a minute a day is okay. It's like far better than no minute a day.
As we're kind of closing up, I want to know 2 last things. How do you prioritize time with like an older set of kids in the house for sex, for intimate conversations, for these things? And you mentioned before we started recording about your kids know when they're older that you're having sex. So like how do you kind of talk with them about that? I'd love to know.
I think as I've been more comfortable with myself and my sexuality, it makes me more open with them to answering questions or just talking openly, so that it's not this taboo thing we never talk about, we don't think about. Like my husband and I talk pretty openly with our kids about it. And we are also like, we are pretty physical with each other in an appropriate way in front of our kids. And so we're always joking about we're going to go park, or like, we're going to go make out now, so you might want to leave us alone, or like kissing in front of him or grabbing each other in front of them. Or so I think they can see that part of our relationship is there because they see an appropriate amount of it in front of them. So it's not, I mean, it probably is still weird for them. It's probably still weird for them.
It's also good for them.
Yeah, like it is good for them to know that is an important part of our relationship. And so I'm sure there have been times when they have come in the bathroom and my lingerie is hanging out drying. I have 2 teenage boys and we just go with it. Like, I think the more open you are with that this is a natural and a wonderful and a good part of marriage, the kids pick up on that and they just accept it and they know it as a fact. And you can say, Dad and I are going to the bedroom now for the night. Go to bed sometime. Like, it's 9:00.
Yeah.
We put the daughter to
And
bed
don't
at
come
9,
in.
and then the 2 boys do whatever they do. And we say, we are going in our room now. Like, don't come bother us. And they're old enough to put themselves to bed. I don't care if they know what we're doing. And then our kids sleep in the morning. My kids do. So we have our mornings available. If my husband's not at work in the morning, we take full advantage of morning sex because it's my favorite.
Yes.
So we have 7 to 17. So I still have some little ones that still need a little bit more attention at night and things like that, or all the time, not just at night, all the time. All of our kids congregate in our bedroom at night. They come in our bed, like they're in our bed, they're in our room. Like, I will be like, okay, I am getting dressed now. If you want to be a part of, like, I'm done. Like, if you want to be a part of this, you can stay in the room. And they're like, ah. Or we'll just say things like, okay, it's my turn to snuggle with Dad now, and things like that. And the older kids all kind of roll their eyes and go away. But one of the other things that my husband and I do is we try to get up on Saturday mornings and we go hiking now. And our kids are older, so I can just leave them, which is so nice. It's such a gift. But that has been like really sacred time for us because we're out, we're walking, we're moving, and just having those conversations. Like, if something becomes emotional, we're kind of moving and you don't have to like sit and cry next to someone. You can walk and cry next to someone, or you can stop and talk. We have really found that those like weekly hikes, or even if we are just like, okay, we don't have time for a hike, but we can go for a walk in the neighborhood. We have found that we have great communication when we are moving together.
This has just been so beautiful. Thank you both so much for sharing. And I loved, just with your kids, like, it sounds like a lot of times they're home when you have sex, and that's fine. And they know.
They're always home.
Yeah. They're 100% home.
And I love that, because I think sometimes we're like, oh, what, we don't want our kids to know. But I love that openness. It's so good for them to know that their parents are intimate and have this relationship. And thank you so much for all the things you shared about becoming more intimate and the emotional changes you made. This has just been so awesome. Thanks so much for coming on, Jana and Elizabeth.
You're welcome.
What Jana and Elizabeth talked about in this episode is what I hope for all of our relationships and marriages, that we can kind of move from maybe a really good place where we're at, move to something that's even better and more fulfilling and more full and just enriching and beautiful. I loved so much of what Elizabeth and Jana shared, especially looking inward, because to be perfectly honest, I am really good at blaming other people and looking at what they're doing wrong instead of looking inward at what I might be doing to contribute to some of the hard things in a relationship. I also really loved our discussion around moving into this space of vulnerability that is scary and it's unsure, but that movement into that uncertain place is what really can create such a beautiful relationship and almost provide relationship security in a way, because you're strengthening your relationship so much by moving into this vulnerable space of showing up as you are and letting your partner see all the parts of you, the good and the bad. This was just so good, and I loved this discussion so much. I hope that you found some things in this episode that will spark some good conversations with your spouse or partner that you guys can talk about and think about and maybe move into an even deeper emotional intimacy in your relationship. This has been such a great season. Thanks for coming along with me. I really appreciate all of your support. I love hearing your feedback, and I'd love to hear what I can do to make the show work more for you, because it really is about what will be helpful for you. I hope that this has been a good season, and I'd love to hear all your thoughts about topics and people to invite on for next season. Thanks for talking love. Join the conversation at ladies.talkinglove on Instagram and tag your friends who would like to participate. You can also check out our website, ladiestalkinglove.com, where you can access each episode and join our exclusive newsletter. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Instagram or by email to hello@ladiestalkinglove.com as we learn together. Thanks for talking love.